Hello, creative friends, and welcome to We've Got Books. This is Jim Yarbrough welcoming you from North Texas, where we're known for our Tex-Mex cuisine, Southern hospitality, and Bluebell ice cream. My colleague Ann Greene and I are happy you joined us. We've Got Books features a variety of genres to tickle your imagination. It is our pleasure to feature guest authors and their books, along with our own books. You'll become acquainted with real authors and learn why we write and how we create unforgettable stories. And today, I am interviewing our own author, Ann Greene, and her latest hot-off-the-press, spine-tingling book, For Such a Time, The Story of Jarrett Ross. This is a sequel to her best-selling novel, Trail of Tears, The Story of John Ross. So fasten your seatbelt and settle in for this joyful journey into the literary world. But first, Ann, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Jim. I never thought of myself as a creative person. I went to work in my teens as a waitress, which I enjoyed. And after graduating from high school, I worked full-time as a legal assistant for several attorneys, and later as a real estate agent. Then, after marriage, my husband and I moved from Ohio to California. I was a stay-at-home mom to my 2 children, a daughter and a son, the loves of my life, until they were both in school. Life became tragic with the early death of my dear husband. While he and I were out jogging, he suffered a massive heart attack and died. I learned during that awful period of my life that God really does take care of his own. Only with his grace and love did my little family and I survive those dark days. Then our new life began when God brought a new man into our lives. We soon married and joined my 2 children with his 2 sons. Yes, we were a merged family. And that's a whole new story. I feel as if I've led 2 lives, and now as an empty nester leading a 3rd. So yes, for you romantics out there, it is possible to have more than one love of my life, as I have had 2. Dear husband and I are still very happy together. My life is too complicated to go into detail about how and when I began my life's work writing Christian fiction, but definitely the Lord led me all the way by having my very first novel published, which I took as an open door to a new ministry for him.
Well, Ann, I'm astounded. I've known you many years, but I still only know bits and pieces of your life. So after that first book was published, how many more have you had published?
The one we're talking about today, For Such a Time, The Story of Jarrett Ross, is my 39th novel.
Well, I would certainly say you've been faithful in the work the Lord has called you to. So tell us about For Such a Time. Would you begin by reading the back cover copy?
Thank you, Jim. Here it is. For Such a Time, the story of Jarrett Ross opens in November 1859, just a few years before the Civil War began. And this one takes place in the Oklahoma Territory. And here's the back cover. A life of danger, a love stronger than death. What would you do if you fell in love with the daughter of your family's worst enemy? Jarrett Ross, son of John Ross, whose story is told in The Trail of Tears, the story of John Ross, lives during one of the most turbulent times of American history. Caught in the middle of a 50-year feud, Jarrett Ross and Delight Flint's attempt to conquer the odds of star-crossed love. Jarrett's faith and strength mature as he survives a hazardous buffalo hunt, an Indian initiation rite, a deadly blizzard, the excitement of riding for the Pony Express on its most risky route, and as a pacifist, inducted into the Union Army during the worst battles of the Civil War fought in the West. His home destroyed, his loved ones missing, his courage tested.
Intriguing information. I've read your book and know it's packed with excitement, adventure, and romance. So would you read an excerpt for our listeners?
I would love to. This is where Delight meets Jarrett. Someone pounded on the front door. Delight Flint started. Who could be out in this blizzard? Daddy and Claremont had surely stayed in Tahlequah at the Grand Hotel when the storm worsened. The urgent pounding continued. She crossed the rug and pressed her ear to the door. Who's there? A faint male voice seeped through the door. Please let me in. I'm freezing. Delight glanced around the large front room with its thick rug and striped wallpaper. No weapon here. She ran to the kitchen, lifted a heavy iron skillet from the stovetop, and hurried to the door. With her weapon raised for action, she slid the bolt and pulled the front door open. She stepped aside as a snowy avalanche tumbled inside. The mountain of snow shook itself and cascaded icy balls around the entry. Cold wind whistled in, rattling the row of copper utensils hanging above the fireplace. A gust crashed the door against the wall. Delight slammed the door shut. A shivering, ice-crusted young man struggled to stand, then brushed white crystals from his face and rubbed red hands together. Where's the barn? I need to get my horse out of the blizzard. The man's teeth chattered so fiercely that Delight could barely understand his words. Come in. She led him to the blazing living room fire. He left a trail of snowy boot prints on the rug. She glanced at his desperate face, then laid the iron skillet on the entry table. You must get out of that wet coat. Hands on her hips, she surveyed him from his sopping hair to his dripping boots. Tiny ice mounds clung to his eyebrows and chapped skin. Melted snow matted his thick, tawny hair. The firm set to his jaw and his intense eyes, shadowed with weariness, awakened strange feelings in the pit of her stomach. Her toes tingled. I've got to get my horse sheltered. Who was he? She shook herself. I'll see to your horse, but first I'll find some of my brother's clothes for you. You look absolutely done in. How long have you been out in the blizzard? Since it started. The stench of wet wool warmed by heat filled the living room. She scurried down the hall and into Claremont's bedroom, then chose a flannel shirt and jeans from his clothes press. When she rushed back to the living room, the stranger stood in front of the fire, rubbing his hands close to the flames. Sit down. I'll pull off your boots. You're lucky you found our ranch. There's not another within a 10-mile circle. Delight brushed at the wet stain his boots left on her dress after she tugged them off. His stocking feet, like blocks of ice, chilled her hands. You'll catch your death of cold if you don't take off those wet things. She handed him Claremont's clothes. Though the young man resembled a drowned spaniel, he looked honest. He glanced about the room, his back close to the fire. Where's your family? Out. Best not tell a stranger the whole truth. The storm must have delayed them. I'll stable your horse while you change. When I return, I'll fix you something warm to eat. Delight wrapped a heavy woolen shawl around her shoulders and knotted a smaller shawl over her hair. He struggled to remove his coat and fumbled with the buttons of his hunting shirt. His hands trembled. She longed to assist him, but decided from his independent attitude that he wouldn't want her help. So she scampered to the front door and, using the rope attached from house to barn, fought her way into the store. She found his horse, head down, legs splayed near the porch. She grasped the reins and led him behind the house to the stable. Inside, out of the gale, the horse lifted his head and whinnied. She offered the horse hay, oats, and water, then wiped his wet coat until she had him dry. "Good boy. You'll be fine now." She patted his muzzle. She stepped out of the barn into the blizzard, worst one she'd ever experienced. She lunged through the high drifted snow to the house, then fought the wind to close the back door behind her, then peeked into the living room. The stranger wore Claremont's clothes. Her brother was 6'2", and the short sleeves rolled in this man's wrist were inches too long. But the too long jeans turned up at the ankles couldn't hide his look of wiry strength. "I'm Jarrett Ross." Ross! She clamped her mouth to steal a gasp. "Thanks for seeing to my horse." Teeth chattering, he managed a smile that lodged itself right inside her heart. He shoved a wingback chair close to the fire. "Nice name." She ran into her bedroom, brought her handmade quilt, and tucked the thick cover around Jarrett. She smiled as she smoothed the material under his chin, liking the cleft. He had a beautiful, straight nose. "Thanks for taking me in." "Only neighborly thing to do." She picked up her skillet, scurried into the kitchen, shoved another stick of wood inside the cook stove, and smiled as she dished up a bowl of the soup she kept simmering during winter. Cutting 2 healthy slices of her own home-baked bread, she buttered them, carried the food from the kitchen on a tray, and set the meal on his lap. He took a deep whiff. "Smells great." He bowed his head, closed his eyes, and his lips moved silently. Though his hand still shook, he dove into the food as if he hadn't eaten in a week. A blush heated her from the top of her head to the tingle in her toes. He was a Christian. How nice. She pulled a chair to sit across from him, curled into a comfortable position, cupped her chin to her hands, and watched him. "My name is Delight." Jarrett glanced at her with a quick smile, but continued to eat, his attention on the food and the fire. So Delight felt free to stare at him. He was handsome, but unlike a few other men she'd met, appeared unaware of his masculine attractiveness. All her life she'd heard every one of the Rosses were exceptionally attractive folks. Father said their looks were the only acceptable thing about them. But as soon as she gazed into Jarrett's blue eyes with those long, sooty lashes, she knew for certain she had nothing to fear from this stranger. His face looked quite serious until he smiled. Then his entire expression changed. He was charming, with his polite manners and concern for his horse when he was in such bad shape himself. Father had warned that all the Rosses, from the father John and the mother Hope to the children, Jordan, Jarrett, and Jerusha, could charm a rattlesnake out of its rattles. She guessed Jarrett to be somewhat around 19 or 20. His lips were full and well-shaped. As his hair dried, its color resembled warm honey. His hands were nice, strong, not a farmer's hands, though they looked calloused. She considered hands important, revealing a man's character. He raked his fingers through his tousled hair. Sandy wisps of hair curled on his wrists where they emerged from Claremont's long-sleeved shirt. She shivered and hugged herself. Too bad he was a Ross. He was dangerous for her to know, and she must not allow herself to like him. How unfair. But how fortunate Papa wasn't here. He'd have kicked this man back out into the blizzard to freeze. How strange to meet one of the dreadful Rosses like this. Fortunately, he'd be gone long before her family made their way through the drifts to come home.
That's a real cliffhanger. So, who should buy your book, Anne?
Anyone who wants a good story. Anyone who needs encouragement. For Such a Time is set in the raw land of Oklahoma before it became a state, and is a story of overcoming and finding God is enough in any circumstances, and new beginnings.
Well, that's exciting. Thank you, Anne. Where can readers find For Such a Time, the story of Jarrett Ross?
Several places, but you could go to Amazon.com, type in For Such a Time, the story of Jarrett Ross by Anne Greene. That's ANNEGREENE. Or, better yet, go to my website, AnneGreeneAuthor.com. All my books are listed there, and you will find For Such a Time there as well. Click on the buy link.
Thank you, Anne. Would you mind repeating your website? And do you have a newsletter to let fans get to know you better?
Yes. Listeners can go to AnneGreeneAuthor.com. Again, that's ANNEGREENE, author.com. There they will find a short biography of me, pictures of different places I've been and things I've done, pictures of my oil paintings and covers of my books, along with their back cover copy, and a link to where they can be purchased. Best of all, listeners can sign up for my newsletter and keep up to date on what's happening in my life, with my books, and with the books of other authors. I'd love for everyone to sign up for my newsletter. I often give away free books in my newsletter.
Sounds like a great place for listeners to go. Well, once again, our time has whizzed by. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us as much as we've enjoyed having you. Join us next time when we interview well-known author Sue Fairchild, discussing her two latest women's fiction books, Changing Tides and Changing Seasons. Listeners, we're so glad you joined us. Don't forget to go to buzzsprout.com to We've Got Books and enjoy some of our other podcasts with different authors. Their books are as distinct from one another as the authors who wrote them are unique. All our podcasts are short, fun, and introduce you to other authors and books. I'm Jim Yarbrough with Anne Greene saying goodbye for now and read a good book. We hope you'll choose one of our fabulous books from We've Got Books. See you next time. Keep exploring the world through reading. Reading reduces stress, sparks new ideas and interests, and improves your vocabulary. So keep reading.